Hey guys,
Hi everybody.
welcome to another Sunday live video. This week we're actually in Spain, so this background is different. We're in Madrid right now.
Yeah, so welcome to Spain, guys. We're trying to be a little bit quiet because we are in our Airbnb and our host family is in the next room. So
Yep, so if we talk a little quieter, let us know if you can hear us or if you want us to talk louder. But today we're going to be talking about local travel contracts. So we get a lot of questions from new grads and new travelers saying things like, hey, there's a job I found that's 20 miles from home. Can I just take that job and make travel pay? Is that possible? We get those kind of questions all the time.
or they might want to know, I really just want to work in this one area. Can I take local jobs just around this one area? Is that possible? That's what we hear a lot too.
Yep. So we want to go into that a little bit, talk about pay, talk about are those jobs possible, what to expect, what are some of the pros and cons of taking local contracts. So we'll go into all that. As always, if you guys have questions as we go, feel free to ask them and we will try to answer them maybe as we go along, but probably at the end. So Whitney's going to introduce us.
Yep. So hey guys, for y'all that are tuning in, or you guys that are watching later, you may or may not know us, or maybe some of you guys already know us pretty well. But for you guys that don't know us, my name is Whitney Aiken.
I'm Jared Kazaza.
And we are both traveling physical therapists. We run the site Travel Therapy Mentor, and we also have a personal blog called Fifth Wheel Physical Therapist, where we write about our personal adventures. Like Jared alluded to, we are actually on a trip out of the country right now in Europe. So we are in Spain right now. We just got here 2 days ago. I don't know what day it is because we're 6 hours ahead, and so it's kind of interesting.
It was about 20 hours of traveling, so it was a weird day.
So today was kind of our first day, but yesterday was also kind of our first day. So we are in Madrid, Spain, and today was our first full day in Madrid, exploring since 8 a.m. this morning our time. Right now it's 10 p.m. our time. So we had just an amazing day. Next week we'll be in Portugal, so we'll be coming at you live next week from Portugal, hopefully.
Yeah, Madrid is an awesome city. We this isn't one of the cities I was most excited about, but it has really been awesome. So that makes me even more excited for the ones that I've heard really good things about.
Yeah, so we're gonna get into talking about our topic. I see a couple of you guys have joined on already. Could you let us know if you can hear us? I know we're being a little quiet. Could somebody just leave in the comments and let us know if you can hear us? We can try to talk a little louder if not, but we don't want to yell because we are at an Airbnb. So Jared's getting our video shared in a couple groups so that more people can join on with us. I see Megan. Hi Megan. Kiara, I always say your name wrong and I'm sorry. Oh, she says that she can hear us. Good.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so we want to talk a little bit about, like Jared said tonight, we're going to talk about taking local travel contracts and what that's like. Hold on, I'm going to turn this off to see if I get rid of some background noise.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Hi Judy. Thanks for joining us tonight. So we get this question a lot, especially from new travelers that are interested in, maybe getting some of the benefits of being a traveler, but staying more local to either their hometown, or sometimes I'll even hear people ask hey, I'm planning to move to, this city, but I'd like to go ahead and take a travel job in that area to get started, or that sort of thing. Or oh, my significant other is going to be in this city for a year, finishing up their whatever. Could I take a travel job, just a couple back-to-back travel jobs in that area while he or she finishes up in that area for 9 months or a year? Or I've had even people ask military spouses, oh, my significant other is gonna be stationed in this city. Could I take just travel jobs around that area for the 9 months or a year that we're gonna be there? So these are all really interesting questions, and we wanted to address how that would work as a local travel therapist.
Yeah, so it is possible, but you give up some of the benefits of being a traveler, with the main benefit being the non-tax stipends that we always talk about. So that's a big component of our pay, and why we make more money as a traveler is because of those non-tax stipends. So as a local contractor, you wouldn't need a tax home, which we've talked about in the past, but you would also have all of your pay taxed. So there's some pros and cons, but you would definitely make less, and that's usually maybe it can be somewhere between $400 to $600 a week less, which is still usually significantly more than a permanent job, but it's less than a travel contract.
Right. So we want to talk about some of the pros and cons and exactly how you would go about doing this. So as Jared said, one of the cons is that you take home less money a week. The pro on the flip side of that is that you don't have to maintain the tax home rules, so you don't have to be duplicating expenses. If you're living at home or living at your local area that you're residing in and commuting to work, you're just paying one rent. So even though you're making less, you're also putting out less in your expenses, which is, a good thing. In most circumstances. Now, some people might have circumstances where they still maintain a home and, like I said, they're traveling away because their husband or whoever is stationed somewhere, in that circumstance, but hopefully the military is reimbursing them or whatever the case might be. But
in terms of pay, so let's use an example of a traveler. They might make $50 an hour as a traveler, but $25 of that, say, would be taxable, and then the other $25 would be non-taxed. So that's like $1,000 a week. That would be $1,000, right? Yeah, $1,000 a week that would be non-taxed, and then $1,000 a week that would be taxed. So after taxes, that might end up being about $1,750 or so, right? Whereas with a local contract, you might still make $50 an hour, but since that's all taxed, you have $2,000 a week that's taxed. Well, the tax rate's a lot higher on that amount of money, so you'd probably get taxed maybe somewhere around, I don't know, $600 or $650 on that money, or somewhere around there. And so that would be, maybe $1,300 a week or $1,350 instead of the $1,650 or $1,750.
So a good way to look at a local travel contract is more like looking at like a PRN rate. So in the travel world, we typically talk about pay. We've talked about pay a lot in the past. For you guys that may or may not be familiar, we have a couple articles and a couple videos talking about how pay works as a travel therapist. We typically talk about it in a weekly take-home number after taxes. So we've said numerous times that we think for most PTs, OTs, and speech therapists, a normal take-home pay for a travel therapist would be about $1,500 to $1,800 a week after taxes. Now, when you go and talk about a local contract, you might as well talk about it more in terms of just the hourly rate, like you would a PRN job, because it's all going to be taxed. So you're not really having to worry about this part taxed, part untaxed situation. So it's more likely that you're going to look at the rate to be somewhere between $40 an hour to $50 an hour. I would say typically probably more on the $40 to $45 an hour, all taxed.
But it depends on the area of the country. Obviously, if you're in a higher cost of living area, that might be higher. It's usually pretty close to the PRN rate for that area.
Now, so some people might say, well, then why wouldn't I just get a PRN job? Okay, well, the benefits of taking a local travel contract at about the same amount as a local PRN would make is that you're getting a guaranteed, hopefully if your contract states it, that you would get a guaranteed 40 hours for a set period of time.
And another big thing is that you get benefits as a traveler through the travel company. So you would get health insurance, hopefully 401k, depending on the company, you might get PTO or something like that, which PRN workers, you don't get any of that. So that's a benefit as well. So yeah, usually guaranteed hours and benefits, which PRN people don't get. So even though it would be a little harder to maintain constant employment, those two benefits are pretty big.
Yeah, so that's one big thing we want to touch on is a lot of people see, oh my gosh, there's so many benefits I could gain from doing it this way. If I wanted to try out an area for a little while, when I first moved there, try out a couple of different jobs, or I only need to be in this area temporarily for family reasons or whatever. There's so many benefits to the clinician, but there's a lot of difficulties and challenges that come with this. So you're going to be very limited on the job availability because you're specifically saying, I need to be in, Denver, Colorado on September the 1st through next September or whatever. So you're trying to narrow your search down to a very small area, and there may or may not be jobs. So you can't guarantee that there's going to be consistent work in that one city or in that one metropolitan area.
Yeah, it all depends on your location. For us, like our hometown, Roanoke, Virginia, we would not have a chance of being local travelers. I mean,
not consistently.
Usually the closest jobs that pop up around there are 30 or 40 miles away, and that's only occasionally. Hey, Wanda, thanks for joining. So that's only occasionally, but there's other places where California, there's a ton of jobs, so you might be able to find consistent local travel contracts around your hometown in California you could work back to back, and it would be basically like you were making a PRN rate, you get benefits, it's awesome because you don't have to worry about duplicating expenses, you don't have to worry about a tax home, you could just take contracts and and go from there.
Yeah, so you just have to understand the limitations and that it may or may not always be possible. And, we don't know the market that well. So we always recommend that if you're looking into the situation, get in touch with a travel therapy recruiter and talk to them about what the market's like, what have they seen in the past in that area. If they're a bigger company, they might even be able to pull statistics for you for jobs that they've had in that area in the past year or so, just to give you an idea of whether that's even going to be a realistic possibility for you.
Yeah.
So those are some good things to look into. It is possible, but it is more challenging and it's not as common.
Yeah.
Now, what are some ways that you could go about doing this if you're interested in doing this? So a few different ways. One would be, obviously, if a travel company just already has a travel job listed there. So if you're interested in, San Diego, California, that's where you want to live and you want to travel just around the metropolitan San Diego area, well, you could just look on the travel website and say, oh yeah, they've got 4 jobs right now in San Diego.
Yeah.
Any one of those travel jobs you could turn into a local travel job. They would just build your pay package differently if you live in San Diego versus they would build it for me who doesn't live in San Diego.
Yep. And the only difference really being that tax versus non-tax pay. Usually the hourly rate that the traveler would get is the same. It's just that living that close, you don't have duplicate expenses, so it's all taxed. So that's really the only difference. So yeah, you could easily find it through a travel company. Like Judy's saying, Indianapolis is not consistent, but if she found a job in that area, then she could easily take that as a local travel contract in between assignments. So say she normally travels all around the country, but wants to be back home and takes a local travel contract, you could do it that way.
Yeah, that would be a really cool option, actually. We've always thought about that. Like if one popped up in our hometown of Roanoke, Virginia, if we just want to be home for a little while, we could take it as a local contract and just do it all tax that go around and then take the next one elsewhere.
Yep.
But it all very much depends on the market. I had one recruiter say once, she can't make a job up here somewhere, but if there is a job there, she'll try to find it. But it's the truth. You can't always make a travel contract up here if there's not one.
Yep.
But there is another option. If you don't see one posted with a travel company, you could try to, just scope out a regular job listing. Like say they're looking for a PRN person or they're looking for a full-time person and they just have it listed, on Indeed.com or whatever. You could always try to take that job to the travel company, say, hey, travel company, I saw this job in this town I want to be in. Could you guys contact them and find out if they would use a traveler or like a local traveler, or you could contact them yourself and ask if that's negotiable, if they would consider that option. Now sometimes the clients won't. Sometimes they're not willing to shell out the extra money or have it as like a travel contract, but you never know unless you ask.
Yep.
What about trying to negotiate like your own temporary contract?
Yeah, you could always, there's a lot of talk in the travel therapy world about people wanting to create their own travel contracts, especially with the tax law changes this past year. So now you can't write off expenses as an employee, but if you had your own business, so say you formed an LLC, you found your own contracts, you can write off those expenses then. So if you're the business owner, you could write off your expenses, but if you're an employee, you can't, if that makes sense. So so that was a big change. So it can make sense for travelers to create their own LLC basically and find their own independent jobs, which basically that would mean, like Whitney was saying, you find a listing and you contact them and say, hey, I want to contract through your facility, and basically you would set up your own local travel contract that way.
Yeah, so, sometimes, like I said, even if they have it listed as a full-time job, a permanent position, or they have it listed as a PRN position, you could always try to negotiate with them and say, hey, I could be in the area with you for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months. Would you be willing to negotiate with me just with the understanding that it is a temporary contract? We've also heard of folks just signing up with somebody like as a permanent employee, like getting on their benefits and everything, just with the understanding that they wouldn't be there that long. Like,
Yeah.
There wasn't a set end date, but they probably wouldn't be there that long. But if they were desperate enough to have someone come, if they had been a while without a person, they might bring you on as a regular employee and, just with the understanding that it might be shorter.
You just have to be careful with those kind of things and make sure that whatever you decide, you have that laid out in a contract with them, because it would be really easy in that situation for them to just use you temporarily. They find someone full-time and then they don't need you anymore and they can just cancel it right away. So you want to have some of those protections in place that we talk about, like 40-hour guarantees and 30-day cancellation notice and things like that, just to protect yourself.
Yeah, so it can definitely be really complicated, and it can be a lot more expensive if you try to negotiate your own contracts, especially if you're having to cover your own benefits. So that's one big perk of going through a travel therapy company, is that they cover your benefits and they cover a lot of these expenses for you, which is what goes into their overhead, and they do all the contract negotiation and things like that. So it can be a lot more complicated, but it is possible. People do it. So is there anybody that's tuning in right now that has questions about this topic? Is there anybody that's thinking about doing local travel or wants to know more?
Yeah, so kind of to recap, the main pros, I guess let's do it this way. Comparing a travel contract to a local travel contract, the pros would be that you don't need a tax home, so you wouldn't have to worry about duplicating expenses. You wouldn't worry about having to move. That can be a hassle for some people. They just want to make more money, but they don't want to move, so that would be a benefit of it. The con would be that you don't make as much money. That's like pretty much the only downside, is that you don't make as much, but that can be significant for people that are used to making $1,600, $1,700, $1,800 a week as a regular traveler. Going down to probably somewhere in the $1,100 to $1,300 a week range is a pretty big drop. And then if you compare a local travel contract to PRN, you make about the same amount of money, but you usually will have guaranteed hours, and you almost always have travel company benefits as well. So those are the main pros over a PRN job, with the cons being that you might not be able to find consistent work in your area. So if it's only a 3-month contract and it ends and there's no more jobs around, then you're out of work for however long.
Yeah, so it can definitely be a tricky business, and a lot of companies don't want to, even if they have a PRN listed, they don't want just a temporary PRN. They need somebody just year-round to be PRN. So sometimes if they find out that you're only going to be there temporarily, you're not the employee that they're looking for. So it can be challenging. It is possible, but we wanted to be realistic with you guys that are interested in this, because we have so many people reach out to us that just think, oh, travel, like best of both worlds, this is going to be great.
Yeah, especially around like the popular areas. So people will be like, I want to move to Denver and I'll just take contracts around there. Well, everyone wants contracts around there, so there's
Seattle,
high demand. Yeah.
Or San Diego.
So even if there are contracts available, there's a lot of demand for those. So even if even if it's possible, doesn't mean that you're always going to get them, which makes it difficult.
Yeah. So and then something else, we had asked a couple of our recruiters just about these situations, because they work with it sometimes, and we'd ask them just some different things, and some of them said that some of the clients may or may not even agree to have a local traveler, because they're having to pay a premium to have a traveler there, and so they're like, well, if we have candidates that are local candidates, why would we pay the travel company and them extra money when I could just have a local candidate come? So some companies won't agree to it.
Yeah, think about it from their perspective. If they could hire you as a PRN employee, they are only paying you, say, $50 an hour. Whereas if they hire you as a local traveler, they're paying the travel company probably $60 an hour, and then the travel company's paying you $50 an hour, right? So the facility would save probably somewhere between $10 and $15 an hour by hiring you directly as a PRN worker. So yeah, sometimes they don't want someone that's local to hire them as a traveler, because they're spending more money that way.
Yeah, and then another recruiter of ours said that sometimes the rates are actually reduced because they know it's a local traveler, because they say, well, why should I pay a bunch of extra money when they're not having additional housing costs? Usually we pay travelers more money because they're having to move there and incur all these extra expenses. So why would we pay them more if they're not? So you just have to be aware of that. That may or may not always be the case, but these are just some things to think about. If the travel company says to you, look, they're saying it's a lower rate, they may not be pulling your leg. They may be honest that it really is a lower rate, because these are some things that the client has to think about.
Yeah.
So those are some of the basics of what a local travel contract is. If you guys that are watching, if you have any questions, let us know. If you're watching this on the replay later, I know we're not doing it at our normal time, and we're sorry about that. If you do watch this on the replay later, just leave us a comment below that says, hey, I watched it on the replay, hashtag replay.
I don't know if we mentioned this in the beginning, but we're 6 hours ahead here, so it's 10 p.m. here, so we couldn't do it. I guess our normal time is 8, so that would have been like 2 in the morning, so we couldn't do it then.
Yeah, so just to recap, we are going to be traveling out of the country for the next 3.5, almost 4 months. So we're probably going to try to do it around the same time on Sundays. which is 10 p.m. our time, about 4 p.m. on the East Coast. Is probably roughly the time we're going to do it. If you guys have an idea for a different day or time that might be better, let us know, but it is going to have to be a little earlier in the day for us, just because we're 6 hours ahead in Europe.
Yep. So next week we'll probably be at the same time, unless you guys have any suggestions for that, and then we'll be in Portugal next week. So I don't know what we'll be talking about, but if you have any suggestions for that, let us know.
Yeah. So if you guys did watch with us tonight, if you would just give us a thumbs up or drop us an emoji or something to let us know you did tune in. I know there were a few of you guys on live, and I hope more of you guys will see it later on the replay. If you would just show us some love in the comments or hit the like button, we'd appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks for watching, guys.
We're signing off from Spain. We'll see you next week in Portugal.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.